Good morning, and welcome to the September 24th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. I'm Blandy Miller, Chair of the Commission. Please note that we have a hard stop time today at 11 a.m. in order to make this room available for a City Council committee meeting, so we will manage our time accordingly. We start every meeting with an opportunity for the public to comment on an item not contained on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak on an item not on the agenda today? And seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda. There's one item on consent, rezoning case Z7022 at Glenwood Avenue, Lake Ann Drive, and Winchester Drive. The applicant has requested a 90-day extension in order to provide additional time to engage with the neighbors. This is the second 90-day extension sought by the applicant, and it's my understanding that the current status, the applicant has completed quite a bit of work on revising conditions based on feedback from the neighbors, and they're currently waiting on the neighbors to review and respond. The current deadline for action is October 11th, and a 90-day extension would extend our deadline out to January 9th. Are there any comments from the public or from the commission? Then, seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Fox seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And we have one item under committee report. I will turn to Committee Chair Otwell for the Text Change Committee report.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Miller. Today we're going to report out TC 6-24 Raleigh Water Utilities Design Manual Update. And this is a complete overhaul of the design manual for utility installation. Let me see if I can find my notes. We heard this case on two committee meetings ago on August 21st, and we did not present it at the last Planning Commission meeting to allow time for proper notification. We discussed the history of the design manual. It's had a long process. It's been in the works about 5 years, has had significant vetting from staff, and has been through the Utilities Commission where it got approval. We can get into details if you want. It's a highly technical and very long document, but the recommendation of the committee was unanimous in favor of recommendation for approval.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or discussions from the rest of the Planning Commission? And with that, I'd like to entertain a motion.
All right. As a text change, this doesn't have a consistency report. Is that correct? I think.
No, it does.
It does? Okay, I need to find it. I'm not seeing it. All right, well, I don't see the consistency statement. Unless somebody can point it to me, I'm going to wing it.
Hold on 1 second.
Okay, thanks.
You should have included one in the agenda. Let's remedy that. Why don't you defer action on that until later in the meeting?
Certainly. I'd like to defer action on this to later in the meeting so we can get a proper consistency report together.
So deferred. Moving on to new business. We have 3 items on the agenda. For these items, we will hear a full staff presentation and comments from the public. The first item is Comprehensive Plan Amendment CP 424 at West South Street. This is a city-initiated request to amend map T1, the street plan, to remove the proposed Avenue 2-lane divided street between South McDowell Street and South Dawson Street in connection with the relocation of the Red Hat Amphitheater. We will now turn to Robert Tate for a presentation from City Planning staff.
Good morning, Commission. Robert Tate with Planning and Development. Like mentioned, this is Comprehensive Plan Amendment CP 424, a city-initiated request to remove a segment of West South Street between South McDowell Street and South Dawson Street. This request would remove a proposed Avenue 2-lane divided street from street plan map T1. This request follows City Council approval of a existing right-of-way along a similar segment of West South Street, and that was acted on by City Council on September 17th. Your deadline for action is December 23rd, and apologies for the miscorrection in the blurb of board docs. So here's an aerial image of the surrounding area of the subject request. So highlighted are abutting properties that would be impacted by the request. All properties are either owned by the City of Raleigh, NCDOT, or the North Carolina Railroad, and all are aware of the request and larger project to relocate Red Hat Amphitheater. Here's that same aerial, just kind of with some surrounding land uses and also development plans in the area. Most notably, you can see the existing location of Red Hat Amphitheater to the north of the request area. Also, Raleigh Convention Center to the west. You have a existing development that's under construction of a residential tower. South of that would be the Heritage Park community. And then if you look to the east, there's a parking deck and hotel use on the east side of South McDowell Street. So here is the existing and proposed, and as I mentioned, the segment that's requested to be removed is an Avenue 2-lane divided street. Removal of this designation from the street plan is necessary for development review to proceed for the Red Hat Amphitheater project, and that includes new development within the right-of-way of West South Street in this request. So this is just for your reference, kind of a broader out view of the surrounding street grid, just to highlight what connectivity and mobility looks like and what's proposed for based on the street type designations. And then separate from this request, but a part of the larger Red Hat project, is a potential street connector that would potentially help mitigate some of the mobility and connectivity concerns that this request could have. And we have transportation staff, and the applicant can likely provide you some additional context if you would like. So overall, this request is not consistent with comprehensive plan policies. There are no consistent policies, and several transportation-related policies, largely about mobility, connectivity, gaps within the grid, and then protecting the street grid. So there are no outstanding issues, as I've mentioned. This followed a street closure request that was approved by City Council on September 17th, and your deadline for action will be December 23rd. I'm available for any questions before you hear from the applicant.
Thank you very much. We'll likely have some after we hear from the applicant. Well, this was the presentation from the applicant, is that right?
The applicant is here if you have any
Okay,
questions.
so it's a separate applicant, all right. So then with that, we'll open it up to public comment. The applicant and those in support have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
No. Good morning, Rodney Falk, Raleigh Convention and Performing Arts Complex. Don't have a presentation for you. I do have members of our design team, Ratio, Kimley Horn, Davenport, our traffic consultant as well, for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Then seeing none, we'll move to the opposition. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak in opposition to this project? Also seeing none, we can bring it back to the table. Yes, Commissioner Fox.
A couple questions. I wanted to start off. Do we know if this block is part of the historic Christmas plan?
It is.
It is?
Yes.
Okay. So which was, when was that, 1790?
92,
Okay.
yeah, 1792.
Okay. And then I guess the other question is, were alternatives considered during the design process and feasibility study?
Yes, we considered multiple design options, including closing down Lenore Street as well. The size of capacity doesn't allow for it based off of those other options.
Okay. Were there any options that showed streets remaining open during either the RFP process or feasibility studies?
Yes, there were some different options that were floated out there that did not have any viability to meet the capacity needed, as well as the support spaces needed for the amphitheater.
Okay. Was it also an issue of cost? Is that correct?
Yes,
was an
that
issue
is
of
correct
cost.
as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Were all these options presented to council for them to choose?
Some of these options were actually presented during the interview phase for our design teams, so they would not have been presented to council now.
Could you speak to the capacity issues, what that means and what's viable for capacity and why?
Currently, our amphitheater consists of just under 6,000 capacity. So as we're trying to maintain that same level of artists as well as the economic impact that the amphitheater brings to the community, going below that would obviously reduce the amount of economic impact and the different artists that would come here to choose to play in Raleigh. So that's why capacity is a big sticking point here. We want to be consistent with what we're currently having and offering to the city.
So how much would the other options have lowered the seats from? Because I believe right now it's 5,900.
Yes.
Isn't that right? What would it have lowered it to?
One of the options that did not consider closing down any street brought it below 4,000. The one that we looked at that considered closing down Lenore Street got us to about 4,500.
How about the tiered option?
Tiered option, you could probably, obviously some of that we didn't continue down because of cost aspect. You could probably get in maybe 5,500 at a cost, double to triple what we currently have available for budget.
Were those cost options vetted through public engagement or presented to council?
They were not considered through public engagement or council. It was done through our design team as they'd worked through the pricing estimates.
I just have one more follow-up question on the size of the amphitheater. I'd also seen through, I guess, the plans with PNC to build an amphitheater out there, which I know is not part of this, but also is going to be operated through Live Nation.
Yep.
That was going to be, I think, a 4,300 seat
Yes.
amphitheater. So I'm just curious if it, can you speak to why Live Nation would still want one that's that much less in Raleigh if this one couldn't be below, say, 5,000 or 4,500?
I can't speak for Live Nation. I know that from what I hear is going to be an indoor venue similar to the Ritz. So, I probably is a gap in between the 2,200 that you get at the Ritz and what we're offering at 6 plus. So there's probably a market there. All the events and artists that come, we're not estimating that they're going to come in and sell 3,000 tickets. All the ones they bring, we're estimating that they're going to sell out. So that's the mentality as they go through and book the artist.
How many days in a year is Red Hat have events?
Sure. This year we're at 51 concerts. We also do 120 sessions of the rink. That's from the day that we do the parade here in the city through Martin Luther King Day. And then we also do some private rentals that do come out as well.
Thank you. Was there a cost-benefit analysis compared to what could be done on the city-owned block with respect to other kinds of development that would bring in revenue? 365 days a year?
That's not my realm of things, so I do not know that.
Commissioner Reeds?
Follow up on that. The added seats, is there an anticipated number of events increase per year, or would it remain the same?
Our sweet spot's probably between the 35 to 40 shows a year, so it'd be remaining the same. One of the things that we looked at, kind of that level of artists, Live Oak Bank out in Wilmington, they have 7,000 seats out there, and if you look at their event list compared to what we have, they're getting some what they call underplays. So Dave Matthews playing 2 days over there. Not saying we're getting Dave Matthews, but that's the idea, is if we get a little bit better capacity and a more structured for our artist experience, that we can up that level of artists that are coming here to play.
I have a question. I know that Raleigh has one of the largest walkable live music campuses of anywhere in the Southeast outside of Nashville. Was there any study on the impact of the larger festivals that come to Raleigh if we were to change the capacity of the Red Hat Amphitheater?
Not formally.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Reed?
Just a question for city staff on transit. What other streets have been closed as part of the original Christmas plan? And are there any impacts on that?
I'm going to call on my transportation friends. Maybe they have the answer for you.
Good morning, Margaret Tartalich, Transportation. I don't know that off the top of my head. I'd have to do some research and get back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Otwell?
Yes, I understand there's been a traffic study for closing South Street. Has there been a study on the economic impact of closing South Street and the other two streets that are planned to be closed right along that corridor in the near future?
I think we'll need to follow up on that with you. Sorry, we'll need to follow up on that with you.
There was for closing South Street, but not sure if it was incorporated the rest of the other closings that are anticipated. Other traffic-related questions? I'm staying in that capacity.
Yeah, I attended the meeting that you all put on at Memorial Auditorium. I guess it was 2 weeks ago. It was pretty informative, but one thing I was hoping to hear more about at that, and I was hoping maybe you could talk about a little, is Heritage Park is obviously tipped to be redeveloped, which is along South Street, right at South Street and 401. And then also, as we know, the entire Shaw campus got rezoned to be 20 to 40 stories in parts of it, which is also along South Street, kind of on the other side of the closure from where Heritage Park is. Those are two very, very big increases in density, tipped to happen in the next couple years on either side of this closure, east to west. I'm just curious I didn't hear much about the future impacts that would be considering the density that's allowed on, like literally on South Street. I'm hoping you could speak to that a little bit, or if you had thoughts on that, or what that might look like in the future.
I am not a traffic engineer, so I have zero knowledge of that.
Okay.
I'm looking over here to my transportation.
And I think I don't just mean traffic, but also, bus accessibility and walkability and all that good stuff.
Hey, good morning. Bradley Kimbrell, Transportation. I want to make sure I understand the question. So the question was, and for the event referenced,
Yeah.
was it evaluated the network impacts from a capacity standpoint surrounding redevelopment in the area?
Yeah, and I think actually in your section that I was listening to there, y'all were analyzing it based on projecting forward, was it 25 years? Is that?
Correct.
And that's based on growth over the last 10 to 20, I believe.
And may I add to Commissioner Peeler's question too, also, I guess, network impacts related to other closures that are happening in downtown, related perhaps to Southeast High-Speed Rail?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just to finish that, though, I think what I heard in your projection was it was based on historical growth, and it seems to me like the growth that's tipped to happen along specifically the Shaw campuses and Heritage Park campuses in the next couple of years seems to me like it would be way above the historical growth in that area. So,
Great questions. Thank you. So within that presentation, and we can pull up some of those slides if that's helpful, a lot of what we talked through was the 2050 model and traffic growth projections. And so what we did was we took account for where the growth has gone for the last 20 years. And what data shows is the volumes have actually decreased on some of our larger corridors. We anticipate continued growth and continued redevelopment. As we know, the network itself helps facilitate that. It distributes the traffic. So for the conservative approach, we took a 1.5% growth factor. So what we did, we took today's volumes and we grew it for 25 plus years at 1.5%. That would account for redevelopment adjacent to north, south, east, west, all around the network. And through that model analysis, we saw how that could affect. And to the question about other closure potentials. And so within that presentation, we walked through what it would be without any closures. We walked through the scenario 1, as we called it, with just the South Street closure. And then scenario 2 would account for other closures, such as Hargett Street closure, part of our S-Line project reference, as well as with West Street extension, today that space there by Union Station. With that extension, one of the conditions of that project would be to close the at-grade with Cabarrus. So we took into account those in scenario 2, and what we found with the 2050 model at the 1.5% growth, majority of those sections would stay near or under capacity. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions, thoughts from commissioners? Commissioner Haver?
I have a handful, if y'all will allow me. But Bradley, while you're up there, since you just talked about the extension of West Street, that those plans have already been engineered and sitting on the shelves, is my understanding. Is that correct? We're just looking for finances to start the construction. Is that correct?
I would have to defer to our partners in engineering services for the exact percentage of design. I believe we are working toward 30%. I'm not sure if we have a final design. I know we don't have a final design, but I know we are working toward a version of that.
And if and when Cabarrus and Hargett are closed, is it a done deal that West Street will extend, or is that still up in the air? I mean, are they part and parcel of each other, or are they connected so that when those two closures happen, West Street is going to be initiated?
Great question. So Cabarrus at grade would only close in the condition that West Street is extended.
Okay.
So West Street extension opens up to vehicles, transit, bikes, peds, everything. In that scenario, we would have to close Cabarrus at grade, and currently we are pursuing every opportunity to open it back up to other modes of transportation. But again, those are conversations that we would have to have at that time.
Okay, and I'm not sure if you answered this question, but sticking on a lot of questions around capacity. What are the current capacities of South and Lenore now, and what are the trips per day? I understand there's been some calculations done or some studies done on what the trips per day, how many people are using those streets, and what are the capacity of those two streets currently?
Sure. I don't have the exact numbers offhand. I'd have to go and pull that information. I recall from earlier analysis, again, going back to the July timeframe, we accounted for what the volumes are today. And again, I want to make sure, so there are a lot of different ways to evaluate traffic impacts, from an overall daily volume at AADT, average annual daily traffic, as well as the peak hour. And so when we see a lot of developments will be looking at a traffic impact analysis, which accounts for the peak hour impacts. And again, I want to make sure that we consider those as the apples and oranges types of conversations. Both are relevant and important, but they are not always going to be the same as far as how the infrastructure utilizes that. So to the question, when we looked at what the current volumes are and what the threshold capacity would be for a street such as Lenore or a South, that type of street in the urban context is going to be around 10,000, up to 10,000 cars per day. So we use that as kind of our baseline maximum threshold. And if I recall correctly, the current volumes are a quarter of that, less than a third of that capacity. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I guess a question for the CRVB. There's been a lot of discussion, and I know there's been some efforts to measure the impact on the surrounding small businesses if the amphitheater is not relocated downtown. Do you have any stats or information you can share on that?
Not off the top of my head. That's more along the DRA Bill King side as well as CVB.
I think that's a very important part of making this decision. So I'm not going to share the numbers that I've heard, but I think it's important for us to understand what those are because there's a significant impact, is my understanding. So unfortunately, that information is not going to be able to be shared with this commission today, but it's a big part of why I'm trying to make a decision here.
Sure.
I will note that that information is, I believe, part of the public record that during the public hearing for the city council decisions on some of these things too. So those are in the record somewhere for you to consider, even if it's not presented today.
Thank you for that.
If you're talking about overall impact, economic impact that the amphitheater's done over the last couple of years, I have that information. But if you're talking about how it would impact negatively to those small businesses, I don't have that finite number.
Yeah, I think any information, and thank you, Chair Miller, for pointing that out. I didn't read through all of the council records.
Some quick stats, 2023, the net economic impact that was calculated from CVB for our 26 concerts equated to about $17.5 million economic impact. For 2024, as we're tracking for 51 concerts, year to date, when we presented last time, it was about $24.5 million. That's derived from 23, about 149,000 concert goers. We're already trending at 260,000 this year.
That's helpful. Thank you very much. Speaking of council, what is the impact of this vote on the council vote if we make a recommendation to deny this comprehensive plan? What's the impact on the council vote?
So the city council at their last meeting made the vote to approve the street closure of this portion. So that decision has been made by council. This decision in front of you is whether or not to amend the comprehensive plan, the street plan, to align with that decision. It would, I think, most directly allow the project to move forward in that the street plan has some regulatory component to it. So, for example, an ASR for a project couldn't go forward without the street shown as currently written.
Thank you. Speaking of the street plan, should the connector be part of the street plan? Why is that not shown on the proposed change to the street plan?
My transportation staff can fill in if I leave anything out, but my understanding is that it's not in there because that connector is really kind of half of a street section, not a full one, and the street plan is designed to indicate kind of a full street section. So there just isn't one that matches that. Is that right?
Yeah, no, great answer. I'll just expand. The connector is essentially a turn lane. And so functionally, it will just operate as a turn lane within existing right-of-way. And what we would know to be true is the street plan determines development responsibility along public street frontage. So the connector essentially becomes now a part of that frontage of the property to the south. Redevelopment of that or other city-initiated projects would be obligated to improve that.
I've looked at the downtown grid a lot. I'll just say initially, anytime we start taking streets out of a grid, my initial stance is I'm going to be opposed to it. So I've really studied what we're doing here and what some of these proposed closures would mean for downtown. And I appreciate Commissioner Fox's point that this is part of the Christmas plan, which that's a big deal. I don't think we should take this lightly. That's my personal opinion about affecting a grid in downtown. We have done it in other places downtown, and I don't like it. It stinks. But I do feel like that connector is super important, and I know a lot of people who are walking the line here that are leaning a little bit towards opposition. It's because once we close South Street, once you pass that part of the grid, you've got to go a long ways down to get back into downtown. So I would love some way to find that we're putting into our documents that is going to be required to make a connection. I understand it's NCDOT, so I realize that, but the comp plan deals with other NCDOT streets as well. So I'm a little concerned. I would love to see that be a little bit more concrete. I will say, I started out by saying my initial position is to be against. I think for lots of reasons, this isn't the best option. Well, I don't say it's not the best option. I wish we were not in this position, but I think of all the impacts on the small business, what we're trying to do in downtown, where we are right now. I'm gonna support this comprehensive plan amendment. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start by stating that.
Thank you. And maybe I missed, could transportation clarify? I think I understand why they said it's not included, but could it be included? The connector?
So Dawson Street, which it will be part of, is in the street plan. I think that's the answer. It would be very unusual to show it. I don't know how to add on to that except the explanation you heard earlier that it's not its own street. It's part of Dawson Street. Dawson Street is in the street plan.
Thank you. Mr. York, do you have a follow-up?
I was just going to say the street map has streets that are identified in the UDO, and this is just sort of a slip lane exit from one street to another. It's not really a full street cross-section. All the other streets, to my understanding, all the other streets in the T1 street map are full streets identified in the UDO. Are you, Bradley, shaking his head?
This is part of a street, which is Dawson Street.
No, I understand that, but we wouldn't show in the street plan necessarily exit ramps, on-ramps, and
sure.
things of that nature.
Exactly.
A means to get from one right-of-way to another.
So should that parcel be developed, what's in place to make sure that that process is initiated? I don't see that parcel being developed anytime soon, which is also important because I think that Slip Street's an important part of mitigating the closure of South Street. So what's in place to initiate that?
Nothing in the UDO. It would just be, I mean, it's controlled by DOT, who the city's in communications with, and it's a need recognized by the city of Raleigh, and so it's the city who's going to do it. I doubt DOT's going to do it.
How would that get in the queue for the city? Mr. York?
I'll defer to staff on that.
Okay.
Sorry.
How would that connector project get in the queue for the city?
So it would, I mean, obviously, it's part of downtown, right? So when we prioritize projects, it would be added to the list, and the nature of the importance of its function and where it is would help boost where it is on that prioritization list. And then it would go through CIP or potentially other funding sources from NCDOT Campo.
And how would it get added to the list? Is that a council vote?
No, staff prioritizes lists and then council approves it.
Just trying to think through out loud, our motion could include a recommendation of some action from council to add a project to the prioritization list, and it would still have to obviously work through its own formula, but trying to figure out how we can tie something here to that important concept. Did you have a response to that, or maybe we have a follow-up from Commissioner?
I was just going to expand upon the comment, and by all means, I'll look to the convention center to correct me if I'm wrong. The direction we heard from council last week within their vote, what they identified the importance of the connector, even the importance of prioritizing improved bike and pedestrian infrastructure. From that, I believe it's fair to say that staff has some direction to bring forward projects such as the connector and other projects that would help address that prioritization that we heard. And then ultimately, to the comment my colleague said, then it would be a council decision to vote for the allocation of funds for such projects. So hopefully that helps clarify the process for getting that project, a project of that nature.
Thank you. So council seemingly authorized staff to start putting this together. That may be enough. It sounds like staff accepts that direction. They could formally authorize staff to start putting that together. Any other thoughts from commissioners? Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for being late. That connector is dependent upon NCDOT approval, right? Is that correct?
That's correct. The improvements for the connector are within NCDOT right-of-way. Let me see if this helps. Does that show up on our side? So those blue lines there, those are Dawson, McDowell. Those are state-maintained facilities. At the hearing last week, a representative from DOT was present. That's the district engineer, Daniel Bowler. He spoke at the podium because the question was brought up whether DOT would be supportive. I believe his response, paraphrase, was he saw no concerns. He had reviewed 30% design at that point. He saw no challenges. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'll just add, having worked on transportation projects with NCDOT as the client for almost 30 years, it's not approved until it's approved. They can say, we're supportive, we see no issues with it. Until they've stamped it, this is approved, it's not approved. So I have an issue with recommending approval for something that's going to have impacts that are mitigated by something that's not approved. That's not good transportation planning as someone who's been doing transportation planning for a very long time. When we have an impact, we have a mitigation for it. And I don't see that we have mitigation that we can count on here. We have potential mitigation. We have mitigation in the works. We have mitigation that might happen, but we're making a decision that's definitely going to happen. What happens if for some reason NCDOT finds something that does cause them concern and they don't approve this? Or if that district engineer moves on someplace and somebody else comes in who isn't as supportive? That's one of the things I'm struggling with, several things, but that's one of the things I'm struggling with, is that we have impacts with no solid mitigation plan.
Thank you. Commissioner Haver.
Sure, if I could respond to that, Chair Bennett, totally understand. Again, I haven't worked with DOT as much as you have, but certainly it's not approved till it's approved. I've thought a lot about that, and I guess my response to that is, the importance to me of that connector is if and when we close Cabarrus and Hargett, and that's not a done deal either. We're talking about it, but that's only if rail comes. How do we know if and when rail comes? I think currently, if you miss South Street, you still have to drive a long way to turn back around if you don't take a left onto South. Lenore is still open at this point, and I'm just looking at the grid going all the way from, if we close Hargett, Martin currently doesn't connect, Davie currently doesn't connect, and then if we close Cabarrus, that's 4 blocks without a connection. That's when I think the connector becomes important. If those 2 streets aren't closed, I don't see a whole lot of difference currently of if you miss South Street, you're driving south quite a distance to turn around. So I agree with your comment, but I've thought through that, and I just wanted to share my thoughts with you on that.
Thank you. Commissioner Raines?
Another transportation question. We're closing from Dawson to McDowell, South Street. And according to the report, Red Hat is on the east side of the rail line. What are the plans as part of this comp plan for the west side What does that look like? Is that city-owned? Is that city-maintained, or is that by the Red Hat Amphitheater? And what is that actually, what are the intentions for what that looks like?
Sure. The north side, the little triangle on the north side of South Street and the property south side are both owned by the city. Currently, the south side is used by the convention center for overflow, large vehicle parking for hosting our events. The intent on the north side is to create a pocket park in that location. And then the south side of South Street, that lot is, slated potentially for future development. In the interim, we will be utilizing that for construction laydown for both projects. And then what comes out of that is a larger discussion.
But the intent is to keep the street as is for
South
service
Street portion?
extras? Yeah.
Yes. Part of the design has one loading dock area that goes underneath the bridge of South Street that services the backside of the amphitheater, as well as a couple of loading docks off Lenore Street. So that portion toward the bridge would be used for loading and unloading for food service deliveries, those kind of things.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Haver?
Yeah, to confirm too, I've heard some concerns about if we take away part of South Street and during events, Lenore Street is closed, because I understand sometimes now during events, Lenore Street is closed, but my understanding is there is no intention of closing Lenore Street during events because we now have access from South Street. Can you confirm that's the case?
That is correct, yes, sir.
I think,
Go ahead. Yep.
I was just gonna say as a follow-up to that, I mean, generally when I've been over at Red Hat during events now, there's at least some kind of restricted traffic flow on McDowell. And there is, as you mentioned, there's generally a closure on Lenore. I think that's just something I'm thinking about with this if we do close south. And Lenore is to remain the only connector east to west. It seems like logistically, at best, Lenore will still be pretty restricted, at least during an event, possibly otherwise. I was wondering if you could speak to that, because that seems like the case now with shows at Red Hat.
Right now, it is closed during events. Basically, as you see, what's on the street usually overflow from production trucks and those kind of things. Our intent when South Street closes in the new amphitheater is not to close any Lenore Street at any time for any event. I would make the presumption that if anybody wanted to close Lenore Street, it would go underneath the same process through special events as any other street within the network. We do not do anything on McDowell Street. We don't restrict any lanes or any of that for the amphitheater.
Gotcha, yeah, and for McDowell, I think I just mean, there's often police cars that are out there.
They do close, they do park in the left turn lane off McDowell at Lenore because they're, obviously if they close Lenore, there's no access there. But they do not, we don't impact anything on McDowell Street. We don't ask for lane closures or anything to that effect.
Yes, Commissioner Lampman.
Sorry if I didn't understand this fully, but the connector street that is proposed, would that need to come back as a comp plan amendment in the future then, if it is?
Make sure I understand the question. So the connector turn lane from
Right.
Dawson to McDowell, I'm not sure if you can see the cursor on your screen. That's where the mouse is kind of hovering around that corner of that property.
So is it going to be considered like a drive, like a private drive, as opposed to a true street connection then?
No, fair question. So thank you for the reference. On this slide, you can see that connector turn lane is represented as that orange pavement. So that will become more or less a part of the Dawson Street road network, and then it intersects with McDowell. So those will essentially be just new frontage along that adjacent property to the north of it. So it will not need to be mapped on the street plan. It's similar to what we have on the north side of the downtown at Wilmington and Salisbury, where those, as you approach Peace Street, there's a connector turn lane there as well, and that's not mapped on the street plan. So for the sake of the street plan itself, it would not have to be mapped.
I'm just thinking through if there is a benefit to having it mapped as part of the request. If we don't want to set precedents of eliminating streets, might this be a good opportunity to tie it and do a comp plan amendment there and have the connection be part of this application process?
I would defer to the city attorney on the appropriateness of adding that as part of this. From a transportation perspective, because there's no break in public right-of-way between Dawson and where this turn lane would fall, the right-of-way adjusted along that turn lane would still be Dawson Street frontage from the UDO perspective.
And then the only other thought that I had kind of goes back to the comments made about getting NCDOT approval for it, that if it is in the comp plan mapping, would that help the approval process of getting that particular connection approved? Those were just my thoughts.
Commissioner Fox.
Let me ask a question while this one is up. I think it might be for the convention center. Was I understanding correctly that what's indicated on green, kind of west and below the rail line, might be a future development site? Is that
Can be. I don't think anybody's, from my understanding,
okay?
gone forward with anything.
Interesting.
Follow-up? Yes. Vice Chair Bennett.
Thank you. Apologies if I missed the question before I got here. Has anyone asked about the impact to Heritage Park and their redevelopment plans? If not, I'm asking.
In what nature? I may be able to answer.
How will this affect their redevelopment plans? What are there any negative impacts to what they're planning to do, this closure of South Street?
I don't know if I can answer that for Heritage Park redevelopment. We've been engaged with them throughout the process when we've talked about South Street. We've talked with them about some potential impact on the noise, which is not an impact. So other than those kind of things, I can't answer anything else for that.
Okay. If you go back to the previous map or the previous slide.
This one?
Yes, thank you. So my concern, not having spoken to RHA, we have an interchange ramp sitting there that was put in, which was a very adverse impact to the community. Now, on the other side, we're closing the road. I just feel like, what are we saying about how we value that community? I appreciate all of the talk about the economic impact of Red Hat. I am 100% supportive of small businesses downtown. I patronize quite a few of them myself. That's very important. But we have people who live downtown who are being affected, who seem to be very much missing from not just the conversation, but just the discussion about this whole thing. It's like traffic, traffic, traffic. Okay, great, traffic. We have impacts to the street grid. It's going to affect cars. It's going to affect traffic. How is it going to affect people who have already been affected by transportation decisions that were intentionally made to hurt communities? That's why we're spending so much time and effort right now on reconnecting communities. Raleigh is in the process of doing a Reconnecting Communities grant to try to mitigate some of the impacts that were intentionally caused to this area. And here we go again, disconnecting communities. How are we going to put in a Reconnecting Communities grant while at the same time we're disconnecting communities? Make it make sense. It doesn't make sense to me. And my frustration is not directed at you. I appreciate everything, all the information you're presenting to us. My frustration is I was feeling positive and confident about the direction in which we were moving with the Reconnecting Communities grant and all the discussions we've been having about Fourth Ward and trying to stitch together what's been broken here. And this feels like an affront to that process. It feels like it's not in the spirit of reconnecting communities. And it's saying that this community really doesn't matter. What are the impacts? We don't know. But we have a lot of information about traffic and transportation. But what about the community? If there are no impacts, great, but there might be. And I just think it's important that we not hearken back to a day when infrastructure decisions were made that adversely affected people, and the people weren't involved in the making of those decisions, because 50 years from now, somebody will be sitting here trying to reconnect what was disconnected.
There is a working group, I know, that as you talked about here on this South Gateway, and that in.
I'm part of that group.
Okay, so you know all the conversations.
Thank you. To follow up on that excellent point, are others looking at the impact on the Heritage Park development plans? One thing that came out, Vice Chair Bennett, before you got here is Commissioner Haver, or you may have been here, but also asked about the impact of Red Hat on local small businesses. And Mr. Falk did not have that data either, although we know it's been studied and it's in the public record. So I'm curious, just because you don't know the impact, does that mean that the study is also not, or that the city is not also looking at that question?
I believe there are other departments with the city that are engaged in that portion. I'm just not privy to it.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Haver.
Yeah, and I'll start out by making sure Commissioner Bennett doesn't know I'm trying to. Yeah, so again, I appreciate those comments about Heritage Park, and I've thought about that. And just to remind everyone that I started out before I had any questions or comments about, just philosophical might be a strong word, but just generally I'm against closing the grid in downtown. And looking at Heritage Park, through Dorothea Drive and through South Street, there is a connection to Saunders. It's, about 300 feet if you were walking or riding a bicycle to Lenore. Again, if those streets were closed, I completely understand. I also understand that Heritage Park, or my understanding is that Heritage Park is going to go through a major renovation looking at all of those things. So while I agree with you and had concerns about it, I have looked at it, and I without talking to the residents, I'm making some assumptions here. I feel like the impact of closing that small portion of South Street is fairly minimal, but that's just my perspective. So.
If I could respond to that.
Yes.
I agree that I think the traffic is manageable here, but I don't think that the impact to these communities is just losing automobile access. This is now it's a 2-block dead space 3 out of 5 days of the year. We're going to make a big, giant 3-block dead space between Heritage Park and economic activity, almost like more than half the time. It's going to be empty streets and empty buildings. There are impacts far beyond like how long it takes you to drive to Memorial Auditorium. And I think that we're focusing on how long it's going to take you to drive around a block in a car. And that's not my concern. I think that there's other detriments to this project that are much more impactful.
Appreciate that. I was also talking about walking and biking, which I mentioned. It's not just the cars, and I understand a 3-block, quote-unquote, dead space. But under that logic, then none of this should be downtown. We should take the convention center and move it out to Lenovo Center. And I don't agree with that. I mean, this part of downtown is the economic development of this entertainment center, not only for the small businesses downtown, but for the community as a whole. The downtown areas, we all know this, we've heard it for years, generate a ton of tax base for the entire community, not just downtown. And so while I appreciate your comment, 3-block dead space there, then let's get it the hell out of downtown totally, and I don't agree with that.
I think that should have been part of the public engagement. But we don't compare it against what other economic benefits could be put there. We say what we get if we lose Red Hat, like we're going to just leave it a gravel lot. If we did development, there's other things that produce economic benefit too, and we didn't compare it to any of those things.
No other questions. I'm going to make a short statement. With last week's council vote to approve the street plan removal and the benefits of the CP amendment for the citizens of Raleigh, I will support the CP 424 to help align the comp plan with any future development. I do think that keeping this type of civic entertainment downtown is in the public interest. However, I am concerned about the process, how it was implemented for this change to the street grid. The plan and the vote seems rushed, and I feel that not all viable options have fully had the chance to be studied in detail with community input. This feels more reactive an approach than a fully formed plan. An integrated network of streets, paths, and walkways is essential for a vibrant downtown. Accessibility, access to various transit options, and connections to retail, residential, and other public amenities are critical for the function of a living city. Cutting off the grid where it is convenient for one development doesn't support the comp plan policies, as noted in the staff report. I strongly suggest that the council initiate an in-depth study of downtown connectivity impacts and solutions developed with community input. I hope there are plans to create a positive, safe, and enjoyable pedestrian and cycling experience to get around the site from all directions. Crossing McDowell and Dawson in their current condition is at best an unpleasant experience and risky. I'm not convinced that the proposed multi-use path and slip road will provide a positive public experience.
Thank you. Other comments?
Thank you for that. It was much more eloquently said than I could this morning. I was thinking about your comment earlier, Commissioner Rains, about other sections of the original Christmas plan that had been closed, and one comes to mind, which was Fayetteville Street had been closed for a number of years to make it a pedestrian mall, which at the time was done for a number of different reasons. And then the city at large cost actually went back in and put the street back in. And so I wonder if that's the path that we might be traveling on this one, should in the future it be out of favor for an outdoor venue of this kind. So I'm not generally in support. I can say if I was being asked to solve an economic development question, this might be the answer, but I'm being asked to answer a question related to a comp plan amendment about street connectivity, which I'm not finding any policies in the adopted comp plan that support it. So generally, I would have to say I'm not in favor, and I'm ready to move forward at the time the rest of the commission is.
Thank you. I will note it is 10 o'clock, and we have to adjourn by 11. We have 2 other new business items. So yes, Vice Chair Bennett.
I have short remarks to you. I don't know if they're as eloquent as Commissioner Rains, but I'm gonna state them anyway. So it's been a while since I've had to type up remarks to a case. So first, I'd like to express my support for the relocation of Red Hat Amphitheater and for keeping it in downtown. Full stop. It's clear that the amphitheater is integral to downtown Raleigh's economic vitality, and I fully recognize the importance of maintaining a vibrant cultural hub in our city center. The amphitheater has become a staple of our community, contributing significantly to our local economy and cultural landscape. However, I must voice my disappointment and concern regarding the manner in which this decision has been handled. It's disheartening that the decision to close a portion of the street for this project was made prior to this being brought before the Planning Commission. Actually, it felt like the decision was made before it even went before council. I appreciate the position council was in, and I respect their authority as the decision-making body for these cases. However, the way this process has played out, with the decision already made, celebrations already held, news articles already published, makes our deliberation today feel largely symbolic. And that's disappointing because I know we all take our responsibilities here seriously. Historically, when cases involving street closures come before the commission, staff highlight the negative impacts on connectivity and raise concerns about inconsistency with our comprehensive plan goals. More often than not, we tell applicants to remove conditions that close streets for these reasons. I appreciate staff clearly laying out their concerns in the staff report for this proposed street closure. Specifically, there are no consistent policies and 5 inconsistent ones. These inconsistencies are hard for me to reconcile, and overlooking them because the city convention center is the applicant when we don't typically do it for other applicants raises questions about the integrity and objectivity of our processes. Furthermore, there was a stark lack of community engagement regarding this project, particularly for those who will be directly affected by the street closure. It is unacceptable that only certain stakeholders were initially engaged, and by the time it was presented to the broader public, a decision had already been made. I'm aware of the events that were held at the gravel lot and the Performing Arts Center. I actually attended the first one. It was a great event. I enjoyed myself. I learned a lot. However, it was not an engagement event. Genuine public engagement involves all stakeholders from the beginning, allowing them to contribute in an environment of co-creation until ultimately a decision is reached. Even if consensus is hard to achieve, understanding is fostered through the process. What occurred here was not engagement, but rather a public relations exercise to garner support for a decision made without engaging all affected stakeholders. So even though our vote here means nothing, in fulfilling my responsibilities as a planning commissioner, I will vote no because the street closure is inconsistent with our comprehensive plan policies and priorities regarding connectivity and accessibility. Mitigation of impacts is based on an alternative that is yet to be approved by NCDOT. The impacts to Heritage Park redevelopment and connectivity are uncertain, and this is counterintuitive to the city's and national emphasis on reconnecting communities, especially given the historical context of this urban renewal area. If this were a genuine, transparent process, I would drill down on the traffic impact analysis, community impact analysis, alternatives analysis, and for more details about the engagement process. Instead, it feels futile to seek answers now when the decision has already been made, celebrated, and communicated by the media. My symbolic note today is in response to the inconsistencies of this request with the comprehensive plan and to underscore my profound disappointment with the manipulation of public processes which erodes community trust, transparency, and accountability. Again, this decision is not about opposition to the amphitheater remaining downtown. I actually support that, but rather a call for consistency and integrity in our processes, where all voices are heard and respected, applicants are treated the same, and consistency with major policies of the comp plan actually means something. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, Commissioner Raleigh.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short, thank you. Commissioner Bennett took most of what I had to say and said it a lot better. I'll just add that I think this was a major fail of planning and engagement from the very start, and it started when there was a lack of engagement about whether we need to expand the convention center or not. And I think that most people would agree that if we had engaged with the public, they would have preferred to keep the convention center the way it is. The problem with our convention center is not that it's too small. It's that you walk out and there's dead space on 4 sides. And this is not going to help that. At this point, I resent that we're put into this situation, but I feel a yes vote is the least harmful option to the city. And so I will be voting to support this reluctantly.
Thank you.
Don't have prepared statements. However, I am in favor of keeping Red Hat downtown. I do think that there's an economic component to that keeps the downtown environment lively, and we want that attraction to the city. So I think that's important. I think it's also important that the city keep its commitment to affordable housing that has been so, in my mind, impressive to date, from the aspects of allowing for greater density, for the affordable housing bond, for all the components that go into the support that the city has for affordable housing. This is their big opportunity to work with engagement with another big affordable housing development just next door. And that development opportunity provides significant housing support for the folks that we need to have employed at Red Hat Amphitheater, for those that are providing the services to the local economic area. So again, it is incredibly important to engage all stakeholders in this environment. And this is, again, to be in fully alignment with a 360 approach, not just the economic development, not just traffic, not just, noise, but actually partner with true partners that are right across the street as well. I'm assuming that the conversation started to relocate Red Hat to the south there, to keep it. So let's keep the engagement, since there is an active opportunity here to support the families that will be providing a lot of the services and the economic component of this as well. So those are just kind of my free thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Peeler?
Yeah, Commissioner Bennett said everything I was going to say much more eloquently, but I'll try to keep it brief in that I agree also with Commissioner Otwell that I think not only was the community engagement lacking here, it did not include all the parties affected, the primary parties affected, working class people, poor people that live close by, that are the fabric of this community, and have been screwed over in the past, frankly, by disconnectivity and urban highways being built, connectivity being destroyed on small city streets as well. It feels like here we're making mistakes that we say we have learned from. And I also want to reiterate that it also feels like that process fell short well before Red Hat being moved. It fell short back when the apparent decision was made that the convention center did have to be expanded. And I agree that the problem with the current convention center is not that it's too small, it's that it pretty much serves as an island within downtown where the rest of the people in the city do not interact with the convention center because there's no way to. So I wish this process had been done differently. I also do support, I want to make this super clear, I do support Red Hat staying downtown. I love having a downtown amphitheater. I think it's brought great things to downtown. I think there are ways to keep it there at lower cost without closing South Street, and I wish that process had been explored more. So I do plan to vote no on this, although it is mostly symbolic. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Other comments, thoughts? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion.
So while I agree with most of the comments against, and definitely asking the question if we'll be disappointed 20 years from now that we've nibbled a piece of the grid, I think the removal of the street is reasonable and in the public interest, and I'm going to make a motion to vote in favor. I think the economic development impacts for downtown as well as the whole community, not to mention maintaining the momentum for downtown to sort of get back to where we were some period of time ago, whatever date you want to put on that. I do think it's reasonable in the public interest, and I make a motion to approve CB 424.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? I'll second. Any further discussion on the topic? Seeing none, all those in favor? And those opposed? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Am I counting? Okay. That motion fails, 4 to 5. Yes, Commissioner Fox.
Alternative motion. I'd like to recommend denial of CP 424 as it is not reasonable nor in the public interest and is inconsistent with comp plan policies related to connectivity, eliminating gaps, road connectivity, preserving the grid, and protecting the downtown street grid, in addition to historic preservation.
Thank you. We have a motion to second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion passes 5 to 4. Thank you very much. Let me take a quick note. Excuse me, sorry, taking some quick notes. Okay. Moving on to our next item. Rezoning case Z 1824, 120 Rush Street. This case is to change approximately 12.81 acres from industrial mixed use 3 stories with transit overlay district to office mixed use 5 stories with conditions and with the transit overlay district. We will now turn to Matthew Burns for a presentation from city planning staff.
Good morning, Chair Miller, members of the Planning Commission. Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. As you mentioned, this is an almost 13-acre site. It is in South Raleigh. It is in between Hammond Road and South Wilmington Street, so it's very close to the Southern BRT corridor. And your deadline for action is November 23rd. Also note that I mentioned in the blurb that the applicant had submitted unsigned conditions concerning a bike share station, and they did submit signed version of those conditions in time for consideration today. Zoning the area is predominantly, well, it's a mix of industrial mixed use and commercial mixed use, and then some residential kind of north and east of the site. So nearby uses are kind of a mix. The site is very close to the Duke Energy Customer Service Center. It has about 350 feet of frontage on Rush Street and about 60 feet of frontage on Hammond Road. And the site is largely vacant and forested except for a parking lot that's associated with one of the adjacent properties. Here are some views of the site. It looks like one of my arrows got messed up, but that third one is over here. So proposed conditions would prohibit some uses that are otherwise permitted in OX and would limit office square footage to no more than 675,000 square feet. The condition that I mentioned earlier provides for the applicant to build a city bike share station with at least 10 docks and at least 8 electric assist bikes upon submittal of a Tier 3 site plan. So the request would increase residential and office entitlement. It would reduce retail entitlement overall due to TOD capping the amount of retail square footage, commercial square footage that you can have. The site has an average walk score, an above average transit score, a below average bike score, very low transportation costs, and very high access to jobs. And it's served by a couple of different existing transit lines. The big two would be Route 7L, the Carolina Pines Connector, with several stops along Rush Street, as well as Route 7 South Saunders. And here's just a map of the Wake BRT corridor to give you an idea of how close this site is to one of the proposed transit stations. It's next to the Pecan Road station area. The request would add to the housing supply, does not include subsidized units, would permit a variety of housing types, and is within walking distance of transit and future transit. Residents in the area are much more likely to be racial minorities and much more likely to be low income than the city average, and the cost of rent has increased at a slower rate in this area than compared to citywide. So the request is consistent with the office and residential mixed-use future land use designation, which recommends OX as the primary corresponding zoning district. And although the applicant did not specify a frontage, the TOD applies urban limited frontage standards for structures that are not single or two-unit living. So the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, the future land use map, and the urban form map. Consistent policies include those related to BRT, corridor development, station area land uses, recommended heights in those station areas, policies related to infill, and rezoning of industrial areas. Inconsistent policies are related to fire service concerns. I'll note that the site is already in Raleigh city limits, and the fire master plan is currently ongoing. There are no outstanding issues, and your deadline for action is November 23rd. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project and the applicant? You have a total of 10 minutes. Thank you.
Morning, Chair Miller, members of the Planning Commission. Toby Coleman with Smith Anderson, 150 Fayetteville Street. Here on behalf of the applicant, who's the property owner, also here with the contract purchaser, Ted Hilbrun of Kelly Development is here on behalf of Kelly Development. They are the contract purchaser. They are an affordable housing developer, and that is the plan for this site. Also here with us today is Chris Bostic with Kimley Horn, who's been doing the engineering. I'm going to talk a lot about sort of the idea here. Obviously, Kelly Development has a plan on why they want to do this rezoning and what they're trying to make it feasible, what they're trying to do here. I'll go ahead and note this very much aligns, and we think this rezoning is actually putting this site more in alignment with the comp plan and all of the policies, especially since it's along the BRT. One thing I'll just go ahead and acknowledge, it's already been stated, there is not a specific affordable housing commitment here. Ted will speak to that after me. It basically has to do with the fact that this has long been marketed as a market rate site. And in fact, I actually was involved in bringing a rezoning that got abandoned. But a couple of market rate developers have tried and just haven't been able to make the numbers work. So Ted will talk to you about sort of the unique opportunity here. The issue and the need for the rezoning has to do with the current zoning. It's industrial mixed use, as you all probably know. You can't do any residential on the first floor of industrial mixed use. So the current zoning really doesn't work for a high density TOD use. It's also the height of 3 stories is not consistent with what the city is saying that you want to see, which is more height along this along the corridor here. Here, just to give you an idea, because is a site plan, what Kelly Development is trying to make it feasible for, and again, we recognize you have to look at all the options, but what Kelly Development is looking at is up to 350 units on this site. They're seeing this in 2 phases with some senior living of about 100 units and the remainder being market rate units. So some really great ideas that are percolating here about intergenerational affordable housing next to the BRT. And there's a lot of work that's going on around trying to make sure that, trying to work with the city to find funding, trying to work with the city to maybe even move, currently the station area is a little bit to the north. There's some hope among the project team that there can be some further conversations because we don't think the station areas have been settled to move it even closer here. We settled on OX, just to sort of, if there is a question about this, we settled on OX because that's what the comp plan said. Frankly, we were a little agnostic because we were looking to do housing. So OX, RX, CX, it all results in the same thing for the purposes of housing, which is, you can do housing on all floors and there is no limit, which was our goal. In terms of height, we wanted to, the comp plan guidance is up to 12 stories. I don't think, there's been some, I think a 20-story, there's one project that's been rezoned up to 20 stories just up the street. This location, sort of on Rush Street with limited frontage, we think is not going to ever sort of hit that height. But we thought that going up to 5 stories, which would allow for, a bonus of, either 2 stories or 3 stories, depending on, if it's residential or non-residential, we think makes sense here and is consistent with the guidance on height in trying to sort of leave some room for the bonus to be used. And then I'll just note, the comp plan policies were sort of laid out, but just wanted to highlight again that this is very consistent with developing around transit. One thing that I did note, I know the Southern Gateway Plan is probably at this point, out of date, dead. I don't know. It wasn't even mentioned in the staff report, but I just thought it was notable that even the Southern Gateway Plan says mixed income housing is encouraged and should be pursued in this area. So one of many, many, many policies that says we should zone for mixed, denser use at this site, and that's what we're trying to do. With that, I'll hand it over to Ted.
Thank you, Toby. Good morning. My name is Ted Heilbronn. I live at 1702 Midwood Drive here in Raleigh, and I'm an affordable housing developer. Couple things before discussing the lack of an affordability condition that's in the rezoning in front of you this morning. First, to just clarify, I don't think Toby meant to say this, but there is no market rate apartments that are being contemplated as a part of this project. Right now, we are our early site planning efforts and our discussions with our full team of consultants contemplates 100 units of age-restricted 55-plus senior LIHTC, and then 250 units of what we would call family LIHTC or non-age-restricted affordable housing. We are not contemplating market rate units out here. This will probably be a surprise to no one. We love this site. There are not many 10-plus acre parcels lying with immediate proximity to BRT lines that we are able, as affordable developers, to get enough site control to potentially develop. And so for us, and on top of the fact that this site's in a qualified census tract, so this site for us is very much a needle in the haystack opportunity. The reason there's no affordability condition in front of you this morning is twofold. The first is it's a competitive real estate site. We had to navigate our way around market rate developers who are trying to tie it up, so it is not cheap. And our problem is that if we deed restrict the entire site to, say, an AMI level of an average of 60%, which is what this project will be built to, it will appraise for significantly less than the purchase price. That creates serious problems for us in terms of gap funding with the city, and then subsequently our tax credit app with NCHFA. So that's step part one. Part two is the seller is unwilling to let us rezone the site at 60% AMI in the case that we don't follow through with building this. There will be apartments built out here, and we are highly confident of our ability to execute on this project and get it done, but it's contingent on city gap funding. The nice part is that this will be a 4% LIHTC development, and so currently North Carolina remains a non-competitive 4% state. So there's no risk of not getting tax credits, but there are a lot of steps between us and closing and breaking ground. And so for the above reasons, there is not a affordability proffer that is in the rezoning, but I'm sitting in front of you this morning telling you all we're trying to do is build 350 affordable apartments out there.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any other public comments in support of this project? Then seeing none, we'd like to open up public comment to the opposition. Any opposed to this case have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we can bring it back to the table. Commissioner Peeler.
Yeah. Thank you for the detailed report on this. I think I have definitely understand why you wouldn't income restrict the entire property. I think my concern with it is if your project was happened to not be built, right, and it was sold to another developer, this lying in the TOD currently, you could build 5 stories there, and I have no problem with rezoning away from IX for the use y'all want to do. That makes perfect sense. I think adding the extra stories with no conditions within the TOD kind of undermines the TOD bonus that exists, and we've talked about this with the New Bern corridor pretty extensively about how if we build over 3 and over 4, or allow densities over 3 and 4, it's almost certainly guaranteed that the density bonus will not be used. I think I personally would like to see an affordability provision that not the whole site, but at least kept that density bonus amount so that if you happen to not build, it got sold, went to a market rate developer, that wouldn't be undermined, essentially. Does that make sense, what I'm saying there?
It does. Obviously, we've got to discuss with ownership and make sure they understand what the ask is. I think that's something that could be accomplished. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to provide any additional clarity on what the ask is?
I mean, is that something you would consider? Obviously, you have to talk to ownership, like you mentioned. Is that something that you would consider? And I guess I'm also curious from other commissioners if you share that thought.
I'm
twofold.
Definitely open to the conversation simply because it's not really my decision, right? Like whether it's 0% affordable or 100% affordable, I'm trying to build 100% affordable out there. Ownership is going to have to make the call, but if that's the difference between this getting rezoned or not, then they've got some reasons to enable the rezoning. But yeah, I'm happy coming out of this to sit down and connect with them and see if there's a condition that can be proffered that makes enough sense.
Thank you. Other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Fox.
Although I'm also always concerned about affordability. I mean, this is an affordable housing developer coming forward proposing to do an affordable housing project. So I understand the complications of how a deed restriction would affect your appraisal. So I'm actually comfortable moving forward with this one as is, even regardless of the affordability component to it. I overall find it consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Thank you. Other questions, thoughts from commissioners? Seeing none, is there a motion on the table? Would someone like to make a motion?
I will if no one else will. I know, sorry, yeah, everyone's tired now. I'm losing my voice, I apologize. I'd like to recommend approval of Z 1824, and I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated September 24th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of zoning amendment.
Second.
Motion, Commissioner Haver is seconded. Any further discussion? Yes, Commissioner Bennett. Vice Chair Bennett.
Real quick, I just wanted to say, Commissioner Peeler, I appreciate your comments, and I agree with what you're saying. Normally, I would be right there with you, wanting to see some sort of condition, and I appreciate your willingness to go back and speak with ownership. I think what's different for me this time is that it is an affordable housing developer. So that's why I'm comfortable moving forward, because you are an affordable housing developer. I wouldn't expect you to do anything else.
That's all we do.
And it is consistent with the comprehensive plan. But if this were a market rate developer, then I would be right there with you wanting to see some sort of condition. So I just wanted to state why, I'm an easy yes this time, so.
Yeah, I'll reply by saying I think cases like this are difficult for me. I also work in LIHTC, right? So I understand how that works. I think just knowing how much land gets bought and sold and traded around pre-development, I think we are sometimes on a slippery slope of, oh, this is definitely going to be affordable, and then it might not happen if there's a big change in the market, if tax credits aren't awarded. I think, I'm also willing to vote yes on this since it is kind of in that gray area for me. But I think just as a city, as a commission, as a planning department, I'd love to see us have more set guidelines on that, on how we treat these cases, because with the nature of the way development works in Raleigh, with a lot of pressure, with guys like you all trying to compete with big corporate market rate developers, it is extremely hard. And I want to ensure that subsidized units get built and affordable housing gets built no matter what. So willing to move forward without it, but I think in general, I want to try to avoid that, and I hope we can work as a city to improve our process on that.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Just a clarifying question. You do have site control?
Yes.
Great.
Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second on the table. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
And moving on to our last new business item, rezoning case Z2424. Yes? Was there something, Mr. York?
No, I was going to ask White to say something.
About this case?
About DC6.
I see. Oh, that's right. Rezoning case Z2424 at Birch Ridge Road. This is a request to change approximately 9.69 acres from industrial mixed-use 5 stories with Special Highway Overlay District 1 to commercial mixed-use 5 stories with conditions and with Special Highway Overlay District 1. We'll now turn to Bronwyn Reedus for a presentation from city planning staff.
Thanks. Good morning. Bronwyn Reedus, Planning and Development. So again, this is rezoning Z2424 at 901 Birch Ridge Drive. And the request is to rezone from industrial mixed-use 5 stories to commercial mixed-use 5 stories with conditions and keeping that Special Highway Overlay District 1 intact. Your deadline for action is November 23rd. This site is located in southeast Raleigh. It's south of Pool Road, and then also abutting I-87. And then, of course, it is fronting on Birch Ridge Drive. Zoning in the area is pretty mixed. We have industrial mixed use, commercial mixed use, and office mixed use on this side of I-87. Here's a look at the site and the surrounding area. It is just north of the Walnut Creek Athletic Complex. You can actually get there through existing sidewalk on Birch Ridge Drive. To the west of the site is a commercial shopping center that has a Food Lion, a Family Dollar, some other businesses. And then you can see kind of surrounding the site on the edges of the screen, there are some existing low-scale residential neighborhoods. Here are some views of the site from the surrounding roads. First view is from Birch Ridge Drive, second on I-87, and then the third is on Pool Road. The applicant has proposed one zoning condition which prohibits some uses that would otherwise be allowed in the proposed zoning district. So some of those prohibited uses would include adult establishments, jail, tattoo piercing parlors, and wedding chapels, to name a few. Here's a snapshot looking at the change in entitlement. What I really want to highlight for you here is that increase in residential units. So there are limitations on where residential can be located in industrial mixed use. Those are kind of relieved with the commercial mixed use, so you have a higher entitlement in residential. And it's not listed on this screen, but moving away from the industrial mixed use would, of course, reduce the variety and overall square footage of industrial uses that would be allowed. The site scores higher than average on all of these transportation analysis points. So we have a higher walk score, higher transit score, higher bike score, and a lower cost of transportation in this area. There's a higher job proximity in this area than the average as well. The site has transit access today. You can see the Route 18 Pool Barwell bus stops right in front of the site. Route 55X, the Pool Road Express, is a little bit further away, but accessible along Pool Road at the intersection of Pool and Williams. The request adds to the housing supply. It doesn't include any subsidized units, but it permits a larger variety and smaller units than the average existing housing in Raleigh. And of course, it is within that walking distance of transit. This area is more diverse and less wealthy than the rest of Raleigh on average. And rents have been increasing in this area, but they've been increasing slower than the rest of the city. So 8.8% increase versus a 16.7% increase between the 2020 and 2022. The requested zoning district of CX is consistent with the future land use designation of community mixed use. There is some urban form guidance for I-87 that is designated a parkway corridor on the urban form map, which would recommend a suburban frontage, kind of a buffered approach to frontage. That special highway overlay district is going to require a landscaped buffer area along the highway, so that is consistent with the urban form recommendations. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, consistent with the future land use map, and with the urban form map. Got a number of consistent policies highlighted here. This is page 1 of 2. A lot of these policies have to do with increasing housing options, housing variety, and then allowing for commercial uses where they are planned for on the future land use map. And then, of course, reducing vehicle miles traveled by encouraging mixed use. There is one inconsistent policy highlighted here. The site is not meeting the standard response time for fire service, and that is for this arrival of the second company to a fire suppression incident. There are no outstanding issues with the petition. Your upcoming meetings are going to be October 8th and October 22nd. Again, your deadline for action is November 23rd. I'm happy to answer any questions for staff.
Thank you very much. At this time, we'll go to public comment. The applicant and those in favor have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Ms. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. I am Collier Marsh with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street here on behalf of the applicant. And I'm presenting a relatively simple rezoning request. And so we're really trying to bring the site into, I guess, more conformity with the future land use map and unlock a little more potential for residential development that's lacking there today. So it's about a 10-acre site. We're at the intersection of Pool Road and 440. And the existing zoning today is industrial mixed use with 5-story entitlement and that SHOD 1 overlay. If you look to the future land use map, it calls for something a little different than an industrial development, calls for community mixed use, and so that leads us to the zoning designation we're seeking, which would be, again, same height, but the commercial mixed use zoning district, maintain that SHOD 1 overlay, and then added in some conditions just to eliminate the less desirable uses there. So we think it's really just bringing us more in conformity with the comprehensive plan, but are happy to answer any questions that you may have on this project.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Seeing none, I'd like to move to the opposition. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak in opposition to the project? Then, seeing none, I'd like to bring it back to the table for discussion. Yes, Vice Chair Bennett.
I don't have any issues with this. I just have to say the prohibited uses, just looking at them all together, just kind of make me chuckle, that's all. It's just, it's like all these things kind of leads to the wedding chapel maybe, but anyway, just kind of funny.
Okay. I like that. Any other comments? Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's important. Any other comments today? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Raines? Oh, Commissioner Fox. Either way.
If someone else was ready, I always have them ready to go. Ready to go. I'd like to, in regards to case number Z24-2024 on Birch Ridge Drive, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated September 24th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Vice Chair Bennett has seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to approval of the minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, back to TC 624. We previously discussed this during committee reports, but deferred it in order to provide council additional time to assist with drafting the motion, I believe that may have occurred, or consistency
Yep.
statement.
I've been in contact with staff, and when staff has asked for a deferral to the next planning commission meeting in order to provide the consistency statement and clean up some other issues with the application. So I would like to move that we defer TC, where's my number?
TC6.
TC 6-24 to our next planning commission meeting, which should be October 8th.
Correct.
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Nope. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. We will hear that case on October 8th. Moving on to approval of the minutes. We have one set of minutes on the agenda today, the September 10th, 2024 Planning Commission regular meeting. Do we have any comments to the minutes? Seeing none, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second? We have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. On to other business. We are still looking at dates for the retreat. We'll defer to see if we have any of those dates once it gets to that point. But if anybody has particular discussion topics, just please let me know. And feel free to reach out and let me know if there's anything in particular you'd like to discuss. And moving on down the line.
No comments, thank you.
Thank you.
For the Infrastructure and Mobility Committee, there are no discussion items for October 24th, so at this time, we'll not have a meeting.
Thank you. Commissioner Peeler.
No report.
Right. Text Change Committee is on the agenda for meeting next October 16th, 2024 at 4 p.m. in One Exchange Plaza. There's two items, TC 722 co-living and TC 2-24 the omnibus list for 2024. And we actually had a full discussion and voted on these issues, but we're going to be holding them till the next planning commission meeting to give proper time for notification. So I think that these are here as a formality to follow procedure, but I don't anticipate that we will actually be meeting on October 16th.
Okay. Thank you. Down the line.
The next Strategic Planning Committee meeting will be on October 9th at 3 p.m. in room 303 in this building. Our discussion item includes a review of NCOD topics.
Thank you.
Committee of the Whole, excuse me, next meeting would be October 24th, but there are no items on the agenda, so I will assume that Committee of the Whole will not be meeting in October.
No comment.
Thank you.
I have nothing to report either.
Thank you.
Just a clarification, you said October. You meant no meeting in September. We don't know yet when we're going to meet in October.
I'm looking at the Assistant Director report, and it says October 24th, no discussion
one for
items
that one
pending.
either?
We said last time there's no meeting in September, but this also indicates that there's nothing for October as well, so
Well, great.
we're just,
It's just fine.
Not complaining.
Thank you. And moving on to our report of the Assistant Director.
Nothing to add to what is included in the agenda this week.
Then I will just add for the retreat, I believe we might be looking at either October 29th or the date of or October 24th, since we're not having a committee of the whole meeting that day. Just by show of hands, we're not sure that we have the room yet, but just by show of hands, could you attend a committee of the whole meeting, I'm sorry, a retreat on October 24th at 9 a.m.? If so, please raise your hand. Yes. Looks like there's 4. If you can attend a retreat on October 29th, Tuesday, October 29th at 9 a.m., please raise your hand. Looks like we have a few more. Sure.
Are there any follow options after November 5th?
I don't know. Yeah, sure. We have talked about potentially pushing it out till after the election. I think we might lose some people with that, but I'll take that back. Thank you. It sounds like October 24th is not an option, so I'll just take that information back. Again, we don't know if we have the room yet, so that's still tentative, and we'll check for other dates in November as well.
So, I'm sorry, did we have enough people for the 29th?
I think so, yeah. But we can continue to keep looking at other dates, too. Okay, then with that, if there's no other business, then we are adjourned.